guys, welcome back. Welcome to Unleashed, and remember, we are the Resistance. Hey, we have a special guest this week who's going to be joining us, and I'll fill that in here in just a few minutes and tell you who it's going to be. But like every week, we're going to start off, and we get questions in from our listeners. And Eric, have you got one for this week?
Hey, I've got one. Matt from Connecticut wants to know, is there a big five, but for the water, for the ocean? Because they talk about, the lions being kind of king of the jungle.
For me, I mean, obviously sharks come to the top of the list. You don't fish for whales. So I would say, great whites. I mean, when you're fishing with chickens, that's pretty big.
Yeah.
And I love halibut. Up in Alaska, when we get halibut up there, 300-400 pounds. I mean, they're massive. So, yeah, I mean, I'd never heard of a big five for that, but I would say a shark would be like at the very top of my list. Grouper can get huge as well, but yeah.
Yeah. This conversations like this is how the movie Sharknado happened, so.
One I'm glad I never saw.
Yeah, same. Ditto.
Yeah. One of those B movies. Well, anyhow, so getting into today's episode, you guys have been listening, and I've talked a lot about in my own past, getting started in the outdoor ministry and all of the things that led up to that, and people and things that kind of brought me to the place to where I do what I do now. And this guy is a very special guy to me, because he is one that, honestly, I talked about Fred Bear when I was young and I got to meet him, and that was an inspiration for me to want to be an outdoorsman and a hunter. But when it comes to someone who was able to tie that stuff together with a passion and an amazing storyteller, and down to earth as you're ever going to find, this is the guy in my life that I kind of just really, we all model, I think, after someone. And he's incredibly humble, incredibly funny, and I'm sure you're going to hear that in just a minute. But I want to give you a little bit of his bio here. So our special guest today is Steve Chapman, and we'll talk a little bit later. No, not Stephen Curtis Chapman, but not to be confused. This one's the more funny one. But Steve is he's an author, he's a singer, a songwriter, and he is a very avid outdoorsman with a really specific passion for hunting. So I bet a lot of you guys saw his one of his books that came out, which really grabbed a hold of me, and he's got a lot of books out, and it was A Look at Life from a Deer Stand. And believe it or not, that book, I believe, has sold almost 500,000 copies by now. So it's obvious that he definitely, touched a lot of lives, struck a chord somehow with that book with a lot of guys that love the outdoors. But it's filled with all kinds of, unforgettable stories, and all of his books that he's made for sportsmen and honestly for women as well are not only entertaining, they're also life-changing. So let me just throw a couple book titles at you before I bring them on. Tales Hunters Tell, The Big Book of Hunting Stories, 365 Things Every Hunter Should Know. I think I need to get that one. I don't have that. Yes, I do have that. A Look at Life from a Deer Stand, and there's a devotional. The Buck Stops Here, My Alaska Dream Hunt, and he and I actually talked about that not too long ago, and on With God on a Riverbank. So, again, he's a singer-songwriter. He's been on over 30 recordings with his wife, Annie. I bet a lot of you out there remember Steve and Annie Chapman if you're as old as asphalt. Steve, do I get an amen on that?
Yeah, Moses came to one of our first concerts, so we've been around a while.
Oh, my word. See, here we go. See, we're getting it started already. I mean, there's so many things, Steve, that I could say. I mean, you and your wife have recorded music. You do marriage seminars together. There's all kinds of stuff. But I just kind of want to get into the meat of this. And guys, you're in for a real treat. And if you've seen him speak for game dinners before or conferences, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So, Steve, welcome.
Well, thank you. And if the Lord will forgive you for saying all those nice things, he'll forgive me for enjoying listening to them.
I got to be honest. I stole that asphalt line. Can you guess who I stole that from?
Who?
Bill Gaither.
Well, of course.
That would, because he's been on the road longer than asphalt. And we're about 18 minutes from his house right now, so we're not too far, kind of in his backyard. Well, man, it is.
Is that where you live, or are you about to stalk them? That's what I want to know.
I was on my way there right now. No, I live in Anderson, Indiana. That's where I actually went to college and stuff back in the day. So that was a long time ago, too. Whenever I always say I graduated high school, I always turn my head. I go 19. But yeah, we're real close. But so let's just kind of stop before we go into all the questions and stuff. You and I seem to pass on the road a lot. And I'm not like waving at you, but we'll be like on social media and I'll see, I think I was in, was it Louisiana? Is it Louisiana? How do you say it?
We say Louisiana here.
All right. You know, remember, Steve's living down near Nashville, so we do have someone Southern here. And I'm a Northerner, sorry, you guys. But what was it, Hornbeck? I think it was Hornbeck, Louisiana, excuse me. And you were speaking like 5 miles down the road.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just, we're passing. Like
most of my crowd was over where you were, so I'll forgive you for that.
You know what's crazy? I think, if I remember right, the population of Hornbeck is 486, I think, people. And this was a little hole in the wall. And if you want to know how much guys love adventure, there was over 550 guys that came that night in a town of 486. So, and Steve and I will both tell you, if you really want to wake up the men in your community, your church, get guys to come that would never darken the door of a church. Game dinners are a wonderful way. And Steve, how many years have you been doing that?
Very unique outreach, but very effective. I mean, what's the old saying? I feel like a pig in mud at those events because these are my people, and I love talking to a crowd that's dressed in camo. There's nothing more fun.
How many events are you doing a year?
Well, until COVID, I was doing 30, 40 plus what Annie and I were doing, but what COVID did to a lot of people like us, it scaled us back. But to be honest with you, Brent, at 72, scaling back is not a bad thing. Traveling is I love getting there and doing what we do, but going there, as the years go by, it gets tougher. It's not a glamorous thing, but I don't know how many this year. I may do 15 or 20.
And you've got 2 kids now. I mean, they're how? I'm going to say, I'm trying to think how old your kids would be.
Well, they're in their mid 40s. Nathan's 45, I believe, 46, and Heidi's 43, and they're all potty trained and raised, and got their own families now. We got six grandkids. We got 4 doe and 2 buck in the grand herd, and the 2 boys have taken to hunting and being in the outdoors. They love it, but it's been a good run.
Yeah. I know a lot of guys I've met around the country where you have spoken and stayed over and gone hunting with them, or gone back and gone hunting with them. And that's one of the things I love about you is you are so personal, and you're so easy to get to talk to, but you care about the people you're with. And the fact that you go back and spend time with them, I know from them how much that has really meant to them. It just made you so approachable and so real. So I respect that.
Yeah, I tell people, I've been known to stay in homes, just, say, make me go to bed.
We're not talking about a nursing home, right?
Well, not yet.
Okay. All right. Just clarifying that.
Yeah. When you say you stay in a home, that has different connotations, but I enjoy talking to people. I'm one of them. And plus there's, as well as I, there's a lot of material to be gleaned from talking to people.
Yeah, there is.
And I've gotten stories that ended up in books from people I just sit up and talk to, or sit at a table with guys I haven't never met. I remember one story, a guy across the table, we were eating the wild game dinner food, and he started talking about a bear hunt he went on and what happened. And I said, do you mind if I tell that story? So I ended up telling it, but it's 50% of what we do is interacting with people. It's important.
I think it was in Chattanooga. I was doing a game dinner, and it was right before COVID. I remember this, and it was a big event, and I was honored to be there. But I'll never forget when I walked in, the pastor came to me and he said, "Hey, we've got a green room, that little room off to the side where you can kind of chill out." And he said, "We have that set aside. You got your fruit and drink, so you don't have to be interacting with all these people." And I was scratching my head, and I'm like, I'm here to interact with people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I think there are a lot of speakers out there. I think that sometimes maybe they're just not that interpersonal or whatever, and they just kind of separate themselves. But yeah, those are some of the best stories and relationships are formed there. So.
Absolutely. And sometimes some of the best ministry takes place, off the stage. So
yeah.
Bring them on.
Oh, do you ever do like men's retreat stuff?
I'm not a teacher, I'm not a preacher. I struggle with, doing multi-session kind of events. I've done them, but it really stretches me to do, like if I have to do 4 or 5 sessions or something like that, even 2 or 3.
But you and Annie, I think I remember seeing that you guys do marriage retreat seminars, right?
Well, yeah, I'm talking about just me doing stuff like that. Annie and I, for example, we're going to South Carolina in 2-3 weeks, and we do a pastor's conference, and we'll have a session Friday night, Saturday morning from 9 till noon, and then from 1 till 3. And we just did the Cove in the Billy Graham Training Center with the military people. And Annie and I can do that, and I'll tell you why. She is the teacher. She is a walking concordance, and she's very capable of teaching. Now, we sing and we tell stories and stuff, but when it comes to the teaching, she's much more skilled at it than I am. I'm just the good-looking guy next to her support man.
Oh,
and
you're the guy.
Player, so.
You're the guy when someone walks up and they say, "Good to see you," and you say, "It's good to be seen." Yeah. Well, you guys.
Am I here?
Right.
Yeah. At this age, am I here? Where am I?
Now, wait. Are we? Oh, I thought you were talking about our president for a second. Sorry. Let me just kind of. Sorry, just had to.
Don't get me started there.
I know, and I wouldn't have even said that if I didn't know. You're a little bit, one of the things I really respect is I don't get real political. You know that about me on social media.
Oh, we don't either.
But I do have, opinions, and I don't. When I say opinions, I look at things based upon what we know to be true, not conspiracy, not all these things. I'm not trying to go down that road here, but you really do. You're a straight shooter. I know next week I'm going to have another guy on who's a real straight shooter too. And I just, I pray for our country. I pray for our leaders, and I do know that there's nobody out there that God, for whatever purpose, hasn't ordained to be there. And sometimes it's to wake us up to see what's really important. So.
Yep, there you go.
Well, man, you and Annie, you were singers. How did you guys meet?
We met in the halls of Central Junior High School in the town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. That's our home state. And Point Pleasant is north of Huntington, if you don't know where it is, and south of Parkersburg on the Ohio River. I was an 8th grader, and she was a 7th grader, and we met there in the halls of that school, and it was love at first sight for Annie. And of course, I didn't look like this back then, but now she's a dairy farmer's daughter. Her dad had 400 acres outside of the city, about 18 miles, and 9 miles, and she lived at what I called 9th and Plum. You go 9 miles out of the city and plumb up a holler. And he had these 400 acres, and I heard her. I didn't really know who she was until, we weren't friends. We knew who each other were, but in the 10th or 11th grade, I heard her telling a friend that her brother had killed an 11-point buck on their farm. And that's when I met her. I walked over. We were in the choir room, and I said, I just heard what you said. Do you think your brother would take me hunting? And he did. And that's Annie knew that the way to a man's heart is through his tree stand. And I didn't know she had a crush on me, but that's where we met. And we went through high school. She went off to West Virginia University, or Moody first, Moody Bible College, and then WVU, and then I went to Marshall University, go Thundering Herd, and then I went off to the Navy, and so in 1974, I ended up in Nashville, and was going to Belmont Church there on Music Row, and the preacher, Don Finto, the pastor, the group I was in, Dogwood, was 4 guys at the time, and we were all living in this apartment, just 4 of us. And Pastor Finto came in, and he pulled us into a circle, put his arms around all of us, and I don't know why he prayed this, other than it might have been the odor in the apartment, but he said, "Oh God, give these men wives." And within a year, all 4 of us were married. But I started thinking about, and nobody should call me and ask me for his number. He's not in that ministry. But he prayed that prayer, and I thought, when he said it, I didn't say anything out loud, but I said, that's not really his business, because I didn't think marriage was good for a musician. And but the Lord started stirring in my heart, and I said, well, Lord, if marriage is for me, who would it be? And the name Ann Williamson came to my mind. That's Annie's maiden name. And I thought, okay, I knew her, and I know she sings, and she's a good Christian girl, and she's pretty, and I wonder if this is to be. Well, I went to West Virginia to visit my folks and to pray about something. And guess who was in town visiting? And we met and started talking. And next thing you know, we're dating. And then November 1974, I popped the question, "Wilt thou?" And she wilted. And in March of 75, we got married. And we were married about a week, and Dogwood was still in existence at that time. It was 3 guys. It was a trio. And Annie sat in on all the rehearsals, and she knew the songs. And a week after we got married, one of the guys dropped out. And we thought, what are we going to do? And Annie knew all the parts. She stepped in temporarily and was there for 2 years.
Wow.
And so that's how we started as.
And you popped the question in November?
Yeah.
Yeah, was that before or after the rut there? Priorities. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to figure that out.
Yeah. Well, our son-in-law married our daughter November 25th, and I told him this is going to ruin your life, man. But anyway, yeah, we got married in March of 75, and been together ever since then. We're heading toward our 50th. It's amazing.
Yeah, much respect.
But we started working together, in Dogwood. And then our son came along in 1977, and Annie just, she'd been traveling for those 2 years, and went. He was born in March of 77, and he, having a baby and being on the road, Annie said, I feel like the Lord wants to promote me to motherhood. So she dropped out and left me and Ron Elder, my partner at the time, just a duet. And we sounded awful, Brent. I mean, we sounded, like a major discord. We just couldn't harmonize, and it just wasn't sounding good. But we were in Monroe, Louisiana, doing a concert, and the group that warmed us up was a 5-piece band, and they sounded so good. We invited them to come to Nashville and be Dogwood with us, and they did. But the consequence of that was, for the next couple of years, to keep 7 men fed and rent, all the rent's paid and everything. We had to be gone anywhere from 14 to 18 days a month.
Yeah.
And that started taking a real toll on my relationship with Annie and our newborn. And by the time he was nearly 3 or just after 3 years old, I came home from a trip one Monday. I'd been gone probably a couple of weeks. And Nathan, our son, I wasn't home but an hour or so, and he did something behaviorally that I didn't approve of as a dad, and I disciplined him. And I'm going to tell you something he did that you would think a 3-year-old couldn't think of this, but he did. He's unusually intelligent. He looked at me and shook that finger in my face, and he said, "Old man, why don't you get in that motorhome and go take another trip?"
Ooh.
And I wondered later, why did he call me old man? And it's because my hair was gray. I was, in not quite 30, but my hair had already turned gray. And he just thought I was some old guy that came off the street and beat his butt. And when he said that, Brent, I said, okay, I'm losing him. I gotta have a life change here. So I prayed about it. And a few weeks later, I told the guys, I said, guys, I got to go home. I've got to leave the group. I'm losing my son. I don't want to become a stranger at home. So that's that. I was chief cook and bottle washer too. I was booking us and writing the songs and doing how we are. We do everything. And I left those guys, without a chief, and decided to go home. And then Annie, she had gotten so settled in her life as a mom and a housekeeper, and she didn't have a job. It's fully dependent on me. It's not that she didn't work, but she didn't have a paying job. But I started hinting, maybe the two of us could work together. Well, she resisted that like poison ivy. And I'll tell you what I did, and anybody that's listening who's in this situation and you want your spouse to work with you, here's what I did. I stopped talking, I stopped begging, and started praying. And I said, Lord, you're going to have to speak to her. And if this is something you want us to do to work together, then let her know. So I backed off. And then Annie had a series of dreams where she was unfaithful to me. And after the third or fourth one, she said, Lord, what are you trying to say? And we're not people who depend on dreams. We're
right.
We're not spooky. But in her case, she said the Lord needed to be this drastic with her. And she said, I'm not unfaithful. How am I unfaithful to my husband? And he said, because, just whispered in her heart, because you're not doing what you're called to do. And she came to me and she said, okay, we'll travel together. We'll do what's on your heart. And so that started in 1980, late 80, 81. And we've been working together ever since. And the importance of letting God change the heart was when things got tough on the road, and Annie will tell you this, when it got tough on the road, because we traveled with Nathan and Heidi, and that in itself is a major chore, traveling with little kids. But she said, when things got tough, I didn't blame you. I had to go to God about it. And that's what I recommend to anyone.
So this is kind of how you guys then got started doing your whole family, what you're known for now so much with your family ministry to the family.
Yeah, when I was, I still had concerts and contractual obligations to fulfill with Dogwood. So it took me 6 months to leave the group. And in that period of time when I was gone, my heart was aching because I wasn't home. And so as a songwriter, what I write about is what is stirring in my heart. And so I ended up writing songs about family that it was just burning in my soul about that topic. And I'd come home and I'd have a song or maybe two about that. And so when we started working together, we said, what are we going to sing about? We're not Southern gospel. We're not heaven songs. We're not worship songs. What are we going to sing about? And I said, well, we've got these songs about family. Let's start singing them. And one of the songs, Brent, was a song called Daddy, Please Find a Reason. And it was about a little boy who was overhearing his parents fight. And the dad packs a bag and starts to leave. And the little boy says, if you can't find a reason to stay, how about me? That's the gist of the song. Well, the first time we sang that together, we got an invitation to sing somewhere. And there was a woman who came up afterwards and said, please keep singing that song. We just went through that. Let others know about the pain of that disaster in a family. And that was kind of a cue for us to continue to pursue this topic in our ministry. And that's how it started. And one day, Star Song had our music, had our records. And one of the guys at Star Song, because every song we did almost every song on our records was about family, they sent it to Dr. Dobson.
Mm-hmm.
They sent one of the albums to Dr. Dobson, and his co-host at the time, Mike Trout, called me. And he said, is this all you sing about? We said, yeah. And he said, how about you come out and do a chapel service for Focus on the Family? And so we did. And little did we know, we didn't even know they were recording it. If I'd have known they were recording it, I would have been completely unhinged with being nervous. But it was just a room full of Focus on Family employees. Didn't know they recorded it, and got word that they turned it into a show, one of their 30-minute shows. And at the end of it, we were excited that we got to be on Focus on the Family, and at the end of the show, we didn't know Dr. Dobson was going to say, and these people, Steve and Annie, they sing about the family, and if you're interested in scheduling them, here's the number. Mm-hmm. We looked at each other and said, oh. We immediately called the guy that was booking us. He was in Mobile, Alabama, and it was busy. And we overlooked the fact that the Focus on the Family aired all across the country at different times. It took us 2.5, almost 3 hours to get through to this guy.
Wow.
Finally, he answered and he said, what is going on? And I said, well, it's got to be Focus on the Family. And that day, he booked over a year's worth of events for us.
My word.
And that was the doing of Dr. Dobson. It was a gift from heaven. We could have not had that kind of coverage without his help.
Well, I know you from the whole family stuff. I mean, that's, I remember back in the day before that all started with you and Annie. I mean, I in the 70s is when I heard Christian music for the first time. I mean, in the 60s, my parents listened to Bill and Gloria, and when Danny Gaither was still with them, and then it was, Gary McSpadden and some different ones. And then in the 70s, I can remember being introduced to the Archers. You remember the Archers?
Oh, yeah.
Randy Stonehill, the Imperials. Yeah. Those were like my Russ Taff. I mean, when he was singing with the Imperials, I mean, I just fell in love with this guy's voice. As a matter of fact, the first song I ever sang was one that he sang with the Imperials. I think it was it called Praise the Lord?
Yeah, that Sail On album.
Yeah. And I just, it just moved me. So I'm curious, because I know that this theme that you've had with family and you've been doing with Annie for years, when did you start doing outdoor events, and how did you begin? Because I've heard you speak and you work the whole family thing right into it, which hits everybody in the audience. When did you start working that? Go ahead.
I decided not to abandon the theme, and go to these events without including the topic that was our calling. And so my presentation at a wild game dinner will include one title I've given it is the benefits of being an outdoorsman, and included in that is not only the benefit of the challenge. Every man loves a challenge, but another important benefit is how it can help you connect to your kids. And
absolutely,
I'll do a song called First One, and it's and I set it up this way. Being with your kids in the outdoors offers at least two benefits. One, Romans 1:20, God's invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature, been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made. Well, you take a kid into the outdoors, you've put him in the context of the Creator's creation, and you can teach him or her all kinds of things using the outdoors. And the other benefit is what I like to call the distraction of action. And a lot of guys are like me. We'd rather do and talk, not just talk. If you're on a riverbank with a guy cranking a reel, somehow your jaw's looser. You know what I mean? When you're doing something with a guy, you'll say things that your conversation seems to be a little more robust. And when you're with a kid, sometimes things will be said that may not be said in any other setting, and sometimes things will be said that really need to be heard. And see if I can remember this, the lyric to it's called My First One. We were side by side in Daddy's old deer stand. Cold December day, couldn't feel my hands. Then he whispered my name as he looked out through the timber. And what happened just then, I'll always remember. He said, I love you, son. I'm proud of my boy. I'm glad you came along. You've been my joy. To get a trophy like that is the dream of every son. And that day was the day I got my first one. Of course, it's referring to hearing the words, I love you. I had a guy come up to me after I sang that, and he said, man, I'm 52 years old, and my dad's in his 70s. He said, I've never heard him say, I love you. And he's here tonight. I hope he heard that song, and maybe it'll happen. And hearing stories like that.
Yeah, so, music can be so incredibly powerful. My dad couldn't carry a tune in a bucket. My mom was the choir director in the church, where I was at, and I didn't actually start singing until I was almost 21. I waited. Back where I grew up in Pennsylvania, you played football, you wrestled, you didn't sing. That was kind of the way it was. You hunted and you fished. My dad, he wasn't an outdoorsman, Steve. He, as a matter of fact, he would take me because he knew I wanted to do it and loved it. But what's funny is the first time he ever took me out, it was that first day of deer season. It was the first Monday after Thanksgiving in Pennsylvania. That's the way it used to always be. And I'll never forget, it was 18 degrees. The wind chill was below zero. And he takes me out to the middle of a field, in a wide open field with a wind, and there's a little mound with one little tree. And I'm thinking, we're not going to see. He didn't know what to do. But the funniest part wasn't that. It's when we got in the car to leave the house, he said, oh, hold on a minute. Now, my dad had been a school teacher for years and years, and he had a routine. And he gets back in the car, and I'm smelling something. And I said, what is that smell? He says, well, that's Old Spice. We didn't see a single deer. But, the best conversations in the world were with my dad just being together. We got to connect and talk. There was no other distraction. It was us. And so, the influence, you had in my life, Fred Bear, different ones. But my dad, even though he didn't know how to hunt, he made sure he was with me because he knew I loved it and he loved me.
Yeah, so, there you go.
So,
I found with fishing is a great way to be with a kid. And I do a song in the Wild Game Dinner called Just Add Water. And it's, being with your kids. But I found with kids, if you want to be with your kids, take them fishing. If you want to go fishing, don't take the kids.
Yeah. Have you seen? Go ahead.
I'm sorry?
No, have you seen that, like, a meme on social media? It's not actually not a meme. It's what they call it now, a reel, I think it is. But there's a father and a little girl on a boat, and she catches this little bluegill, and she is excited, and she's dancing, and the caption says, and she thinks it's all about the fish.
Yeah, yeah.
It was
That's,
the memory.
Trace Atkins has a great song about that, too.
Yeah.
But, being with the kids, I didn't abandon them, and Nathan loves to hunt. He just bought 82 acres south of Nashville that he bought it last spring, not this recent spring, but last year. And he's putting in a food plot, and we're strategizing. You know how we get about this time of the year. We start to paw the ground with our deer gear on, but I'm on the prowl for a side by side, because where we park, there's an old house there that he's restoring, and everything you hunt is uphill from there. And for a 72-year-old, I'm going to need a side by side. So if anybody's got one they want to give away, let me know. But
hey, I'll join you on that.
Yeah, and Nathan and Heidi, she doesn't hunt. She loves to fish. We've been on the Appalachian Trail. She loves to canoe and kayak and stuff. So we've done that. And they're passing it on to their own kids and the outdoors. But it's just one of the great benefits. Plus, if you're with your kids, it gives your wife a break.
That's right.
If your kids are little, take the kids away, and when you get back, I used to say this. I could tell when I took the kids away, Annie's countenance was lifted when I'd come back, like after a year.
Yeah. Here's something funny. I was at a game dinner this spring, and I was showing a guy a picture of. We have a mini. Here we go. I'm not a Starbucks guy, so I couldn't tell you all the flavors. This is kind of a flavor of a dog. It's a mini F1B golden doodle. That's like the equivalent of saying, give me a double pump mocha with all these other, whatever they say. But so I was showing this guy this, he was expecting me to show him that I had like a Malamute or a Beagle, or a bird dog. And he goes, I thought you'd have a hunting dog. I said, that is a hunting dog. He says, a mini F1B golden doodle is not a hunting dog. I said, yeah, it is. He goes, how do you figure? I said, that's the dog that keeps my wife happy while I go hunting. There you go. It's a hunting dog.
You're a wise man. And you just gave a lot of guys a great idea.
There you go. Happy wife, happy life. Hey, so
that's right.
Left turn, Clyde. Going back, a look at life from a deer stand really opened my eyes to just nature, God, creation, relationships. When, and how, what caused you to want to write that and all that stuff that we now see? I mean, what was it that moved you to do that?
Well, there's a camp out in Nebraska called Maranatha Camp. It's near North Platte, and it's 2,000 acres. And the guy that ran it decided to do a hunting camp for a weekend with guys where you would draw for a stand. They had like 20 stands around the property, and every evening you would draw for one. And my job at the time was to sing and do the devotions around the campfire at night. And we were there, and we gathered after the first day, and it was a chilly day, sunny but very chilly. And one of the guys around the campfire or the fireplace started talking about the vapor that he was breathing out that morning, and how he was sure the deer could see it, and it just roll out, and how your breath does in a cold day, especially when the sun's shining on you. And he started talking about it, and he said, I watched that vapor go out there and just hang for a minute and then disappear. And he said, I thought about James, the passage of James, we're just a vapor. And I went, I thought that same thing. I wonder how many other guys have thought that same thing. So that night, I wrote a chapter called The Vapor. And then I thought, I wonder how many more of these I can come up with just to connect with these guys that I so enjoy being around. And about, a few weeks later, I had 15 stories in the can. And I thought, self-publish. So that's when I called Charlie Alsheimer and asked him if he had a picture that would do two things for the cover of my self-published book. And that was a woman would look at it and go, oh, beautiful. And a man would look at the buck on the cover and his trigger finger twitch. So Charlie provided me a great picture. We self-published the book. And again, it was just, my goal was to connect with guys. And plus, we were traveling and we always had a product table with our books. And by then, by the way, we had written a couple of books through Baker Books. It used to be Bethany.
Yep.
And we had written Married Lovers, Married Friends, and Gifts Your Kids Can't Break. And by then, I was, kind of familiar with the writing process. But I'd never written anything by myself. We had ghostwriters on those to help us with the process. But I did this, and I thought, they're not going to take this book. So I said, let's self-publish. So I did. And I had the original title was Lessons from a Deer Stand, and the guy that edited said, oh, that's too preachy. I need to come up with something a little better than that. He said, let me suggest a look at life from a deer stand. Well, that was just a great suggestion. I ended up paying him extra later on just to say thanks for a great title. But we self-published, and I printed 10,000 copies because at the time in 96, it was 38 cents a copy. It's 130 pages. Very easy read. Men are bumper sticker people. We like short stuff.
Yep.
And so the chapters weren't that long, and I was able to print these books. And I'm actually in the deer stand one day, and I'm thinking, okay, we got the shipment of 10,000 books. They're in the garage. What are we going to do with them other than sell them at our concerts? So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I wonder. And at that time, Brent, you got to understand they were not the big box. Most of the Christian bookstores in the country were privately owned, family owned, small places. And I'm thinking, these people are buying our product, our CDs. I wonder if they would be interested in this. So I come out of the deer stand. I went to Eileen, the lady that worked for us. I said, I want you to call 10 stores within 500 miles, Arkansas, Georgia, all these states, and ask them if they would be interested in carrying a book for hunters called A Look Like from a Deer Stand. So she called, and I said, here's what you do. You tell them we will send you 25 books and 12 books on cassette, and what you sell, we'll split the profit, and what you don't sell, ship back to us. We'll pay the shipping out, and you pay the shipping back. So they couldn't pass up that deal. So within about 10 days, this store in Hot Springs, Arkansas called and said, we're sold out. We need more.
Wow.
They ended up selling 300 or 400 books. And we knew we were onto something. And we sold about 30,000 copies and just exhausted all of our contacts. And I went to Harvest House and I because someone gave me a book by Jim Grassi, I believe is his last name, called Promising Waters, and it was about fishing. And I'm thinking, okay, Harvest House, if they're interested in fishermen, maybe they'd be interested in hunters. So I sent the book to their acquisitions editor, and the lady turned around and gave it to her husband, who is a hunter, and said, read this and tell me what you think. A couple of days later, he gave back to her and said, you need to do this. And the rest is history. Harvest House picked the book up, did a little bit different cover using Charlie's pictures, and did a trade version. Mine was an author version, and they did a trade version, and they've been gangbusters ever since. And then, asked for another one, and then another one, and then they've broken it up into devotionals, and so that's how that got started. And I'm grateful, so grateful for the opportunity, the doors that's open because of that, for me to get to do wild game dinners and other events like that. it's just a gift from God, and I know that.
Well,
and
Steve, you are so kind, because I did over the last however many years was reading your outdoor books, and I wrote the first one of the outdoor books that I did. It was called Into the Wilds, and I sent it to you. It was originally called Off the Hook, and you got a hold of me and you said, I think you need to change that to Living Life Off the Hook. So you were to give me some advice in the same way you were given that. But then when the publisher got it, they changed it to Into the Wilds. And then I thought, well, would he endorse a second one? I sent it to you, and you were so kind. And I mean, again, you've been an influence and an encouragement to me for so long, really.
Well, I wouldn't have done it if I didn't trust you.
I believe that. I do. I know that about you. And I appreciate that. Honored, totally honored. So,
well, I'll tell the people what kind of guy you are. You sent me texted me a picture the other day, and you've got was it flowers or something? And you said, I'm getting ready to have a picnic with my wife.
Oh yeah, that was.
And I said I'm not showing this picture to Annie because this is making me look really bad.
I could sit here and do a whole podcast. I could do 20 podcasts on how much I love my wife. And we went to the little spots where we first met and all the things we did when we first, got together. And oh man, you know those moments, because when you love your wife so much, you don't want to leave those moments. You wish you could just stay there, whether it's a concert you're at together or a view of creation. You're both, feeling love and what God did. And don't get me started. I mean, I could talk hunting if we wanted to get down to hardcore, don't be seen, heard, or smell, what kind of broadhead, what kind of bow, all that kind of stuff. But you get me talking about loving your wife, that hands down is my favorite thing. I am so.
Well, that's your qualification for, as far as I'm concerned, for speaking. My dad was a pastor. Who he was in the pulpit was not any different than who he was at home. And who he was at home was not any different than what he was in the pulpit. That's the highest compliment I could pay my dad. He was a great preacher, but the higher compliment was who he was at home. And that was his qualification.
One of the neatest things.
Kudos to you, but you are making me look bad, man.
One of the neatest things of that date the other night, is I had gotten her a card and I had written in it, and I was writing, it was like these trifold cards, and I covered the whole thing on the inside because I love words. And I said something. I said, when's the last time that you can remember asking me, do you love me? And she goes, I can't. That was the biggest compliment I could have had. Yeah. And guys, so go ahead.
My mother at their 50th anniversary, my mom and dad's 50th, she stood up and she said, I just want you all to know I married me a has-been. And we all laughed, and she said, he has been faithful. He has been true. Whatever I wanted, he always came through. And I went, darn, there's a song right there. So I wrote a song called Has Been. It's a fun song, just quoting my mother. And I thought, okay, Dad did good if he's getting that kind of compliment. But I'll tell you this about, the guys that hunt, who listen or fish or whatever, if you have a hobby that you're spending money on, let me make a suggestion. If you go buy something, like let's say you need a new release for your bow, you want to get a new Scott or whatever they're making now, and it's $75 or $100, whatever you're paying, go get cash out of the bank. And after you come home, you hold that thing up and say, I got me something for what I like to do. Here's you some cash and equal value for whatever it is you like to do. You're talking about winning points right there. And if you're a deer hunter, points are important.
Yep.
You're going to win some points.
Yep.
And I call it the equal cash value method. And now I don't recommend that with Ranger boats and that kind of thing. So, or Harley Davidsons, because that's above my ability. But these little things that we buy, just let her know you're thinking about her and that you're being fair with your funds.
And Steve, one of the things I always talk about with guys at game dinners too is I'll say, we all get our phones out. We're showing each other how big the buck is we got last year. Did I have more points than you did? All these different things, and it's because we're trying to get our identity from our performance. And if a man is tied up in that, he isn't going to be able to love his wife well because it's going to be all about him, his performance. Look at me. But when we can die, this is one of the things I wanted to ask you is when we can die to self, because when we love someone so much that we would lay our life down for them, we know we've really found what love looks like. And I can only do that when my identity is in Christ, because when my identity is in Christ, I no longer need something from my wife. I now can give it to her. I can offer it to her. And that makes her beauty come alive and makes the masculinity in me just wow. It's incredible the way God made this stuff. So let me ask you, I got maybe two things I want to ask, and then we're going to wrap it up. But you speak all over the country. You've been in music. You're an author. You're a speaker. All these different hats you've worn for so many years. And I'll tell you what, selling almost 500,000 books, people, they see these bestsellers. Well, they sold millions and millions. I'm telling you, that is not the norm. If you go in and you even Google, what's the average amount of books that someone might sell, it's only a couple thousand books. It really is that low. So you definitely touched a chord with guys. And I think one of the things is you are so disarming with your personality and so down to earth and so real that it helps us get in touch with that side of us where we don't have to try to prove to be someone, because you laugh at yourself. You'll make fun of yourself sometimes when you're like you did at the beginning of this podcast. There's something really disarming about that. And it comes from a person who understands where their identity comes from. So I wanted to ask you, how important do you think it is that men maybe have another man walk with them through the wilderness to help them discover all this stuff like we're talking about, both the physical and the spiritual wilderness?
Oh, man, there's no way to put a value on that. I have a good friend, Lindsay, who, we've hunted together. He was my cameraman in Alaska when I took the Brownie, and we've been on the Lake Erie, just all kinds of stuff. And we even have parallel events in our lives. His septic tank went out and mine went out at the same time. He had a heart attack. I ended up in the emergency room with a heart issue. It wasn't life threatening, but within days. And just last week, his AC went out, and I went, oh no. And then my AC went out. So hey, we are brothers of different mothers. And Lindsay is the kind of guy who lets me be who I am. And if he detects something, the other day we were playing golf, and I just, I went off the rails and hit one off the fairway. And he looked over and he said, humility is good for Steve Chapman. That kind of interchange, you just can't put a value on it. I call him to task. He calls me to task, and we do it gently. It's not something we yell at each other, but we're willing to allow the other one to be, an advisory source. And I have a couple of friends like that, and again, there's just no way to measure the value of accountability with a brother or two brothers. And I always think about the disciples, how they're out there, being men, and who called them down when they got out of hand. Sitting around fires or whatever, they were just men, and somebody had to call them down. It's probably Peter.
Yeah, probably.
Then again, he probably instigated.
That's right.
But anyway, I'm grateful for, Annie is a great, of course, a soundboard for my life as a believer. But we also, and she has friends that she calls on that say things, they talk about things that Annie and I don't talk about.
Yeah.
I have things I talk about with Lindsay that I won't, it's hard to talk about with Annie. So, yeah.
Masculinity bestows masculinity. Femininity can never bestow masculinity. It's that man speaking to a man. And I'm a big believer, I hear guys saying, accountability groups. And I say, great. Just be careful with the interpretation of that word. Don't make it so that you're like reporting to your parole officer each week. You know, it's a mutual thing. We're both in relationship. We're both holding each other capable is the way I always like to say it with that. But it is vital. And, you know, we said today, you and I were talking this morning about we have guys we might only see once or twice a year, maybe hunting turkey in the spring or maybe hunting deer in the fall. But we have that connection with them. And somehow, guys in the outdoors, we have this bond that no matter what's going on, we know we can reach out to them. There's a brotherhood. There really is.
Yeah. It's a blood bond.
Yep. Well, man, we are approaching almost 1 hour. We got to keep our limit within that. But Steve,
wow.
I can't even tell you how honored I am to have you on here and the respect I have for you and the work you've done with men for years. How can people find out about, you know, you or you and Annie and the things you're doing now to be able to get a hold of you?
Well, we have a website, just steveandanniechapman.com. Facebook site is Steve Annie Chapman. Steve Annie is one word, Chapman. But, you know, we post stuff there from time to time. And but the website has our contact info, and we're scheduled by a fellow named Stormy Mitchell at the Mitchell Group. He's a good guy. And that's how we do it, and the books are in various bookstores, and my latest one, by the way, is A Look at Life from the Fairway. So any golfer out there, I like hunting and golf because they're both alike. You go to the woods and look for something.
That's right.
So at least I do. But I've reached out to that world, and just, you know, anything that people can pick up, they're going to. There will be it's a resource for improving your life and your walk with Christ. That's the main goal.
Well, I want to just finish up with this. Steve, again, thank you for being here. I want to have you back sometime. I know you're the man of a million stories, and I know our listeners are going to love it. But when I asked the last question about, you know, how important is identity, and everything you've been hearing today, what Steve's been talking about, what we've been talking about, is about a relationship with our Maker. And guys, I want you to know something. A lot of us, we've been through hard times. Maybe you've been through divorce, maybe you've been through loss of a job, and your question, you know, do I really have what it takes? If you're a believer in Jesus Christ, you absolutely have everything you will ever need because the God of the universe is in you. And I always say this, that when a man knows who he is in Christ, that he's been created in the image of the living God, when he's no longer held captive by the opinions of others or cares whether he lives or dies, he is now incredibly dangerous for good. Steve, thank you for being so real. You're being authentic and being dangerous for good. It is an honor to call you brother, my friend.
I appreciate it. Appreciate your time.
All right, guys, we will see you all back here next week on the next episode of Unleashed. And remember, we are the resistance. See you next time.